Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Tony Nunziato. I'm the president of Juniper Park Civic Association. Tonight we're joined today by the several candidates who are running for borough president. Just want to acknowledge the ones who did come to our Zoom meeting. We start off with Elizabeth Crowley. There you go. Ao Yen and Anthony Miranda.
Pleasure to be here.
Say it again? Good. I just want to let everybody know that we did reach out to the other candidates. We reached out to Donovan Richards, and to no avail, he ever got back to us. His private cell phone, to his business, and if my opinion as president and as the head of the Civic Association, he can't make himself available for us now to see comments. How could he be available to us if he decides to try to win for a borough? Also, we had Costa we invited, but I think he had an illness. Is that correct, Christina? He was originally coming?
He was coming up until yesterday. And then I got a phone call from one of his staff members saying that he still has some lingering effects of COVID, which he had back in April. And so he wasn't sure if he was going to be well enough to attend. And I asked, well, didn't he attend the Zoom meeting for the city council hearing? And she said, well, yeah. And I said, well, I guess he wasn't feeling too bad then. Yeah, so that's another one that I think I'm crossing off my list of potential who's going to get my vote. So
There you go.
down to you.
Well,
As far as I'm concerned, personally, I can't speak on behalf of the Civic, but there's really, I just found that to be very,
and that's what we're doing here tonight. What we're doing this evening is we're giving everybody an opportunity who wants to be our borough president, who wants to represent us. And so if you can't represent us, if you don't even want to show who you are, describe what you want to do for us and be part of us, that's what we're here for. Juniper Park Civic Association is the largest civic association in New York. They're all concerned. It's an amazing neighborhood. We have boroughs. We have not the boroughs, the towns of Maspeth, Middle Village. We have Ridgewood, even Glendale and Glendale. We service a lot, and we're looking for the borough president to represent us. So, Christina, we're going to turn it over to Christina this evening. She has a list of all the questions she wants to ask, and she's going to start off by people doing intro. And Christina, I turn everything over to you. This way we could get the debate on. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Three of you coming shows a lot that you are concerned for the people of our town. We appreciate that you're here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we decided that since we have fewer candidates participating, we're going to allow you to have 2 minutes to provide an introduction to yourself. So I guess we'll start with Mr. Miranda.
Again, I want to thank you for the invitation and hosting the meeting. It's important to get the information out as much as possible. My name is Anthony Miranda. I am married. I have 3 children. My youngest is 12 years old, still in Bell Academy here in Queens. And I moved to Queens for the opportunity to be able to do more and provide more for my family. I'm retired from the New York City Police Department with over 20 years. I retired as a sergeant, a decorated sergeant in the New York City Police Department. I went on to be the chief of police over at the Administration of Children's Services. I run my own business, and I have been a community activist for over 30 years, founding the organization called the National Latino Officers Association and working with several other civic-minded organizations to create the changes and accountability that we've been looking for. Our platform is to ensure that the Queens Borough President is independent enough to defend the rights of our community residents. Too often we have candidates that are compromised by political machines. They're beholden to somebody else and not the voice of the people. We also have candidates that historically have received money from billionaire developers, and therefore they're also not responsive to the needs of the community. I decided to run for Queens Borough President because as a father and raising my family here, I felt it was time to have a voice that will represent and speak for the people of Queens, have the fights that we need to have and be able to defend our communities when things are wrong and when they are right. Be able to stand up against all the pressures and take the position of what the people want. We need a lot of changes in Queens. I mean, most of the conversation about Queens ends with the word crisis in it right now. Housing crisis, job crisis, employment crisis, small business crisis. This is not what our future needs to be looking like. Many of the problems that we're facing now are the result of either a deliberate action or the inaction of people who are already elected to office to represent us, who have failed us. So my running for Queens Borough President is to say that I think people are just sick and tired of business as usual, and they want to be able to move forward in the future and ensure that they have somebody whose primary goal is representing their interests. And that's why I decided to run for Queens Borough President. There are a lot of changes in front of us, and I think the Queens Borough President is going to play a crucial role in what the future looks like and be the voice of the people. And I talk about everything from the overdevelopment of certain areas to the how our community votes look and act and interact with the people they're supposed to represent. I think there are a lot of changes and ways that we can both work better and do better and be able to, again, provide the services that we've much and so desperately have needed for quite some time. COVID-19 is just the latest of incidents that we say show the failures of a system that wasn't prepared to handle and protect our families. Many communities were left out of the services, and many communities were left out of getting assistance during those times. I lost my sister-in-law. My wife got sick to COVID-19. She recovered, but we all lost family members and friends close to us. And then we have to wonder, could there have been a better response? And there should have been a better response. And the Queens Borough President in the future will be able to bridge that gap to ensure that all of our communities receive equal access and the fair amount of service that's needed. So again, I thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to your questions and to be able to participate in the debate.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Mr. Dowyen.
Thank you. I'm not a politician, but a businessman. I will bring creative leaderships to Queens and ensure that we bring our economy back on track. Unfortunately, the political establishment has catered to special interests and failed to address the long-standing problems of homelessness, crumbling public transit, and the lack of affordable housing. My opponents have been members of the political establishment for years and have failed to address these problems. I will increase jobs by working with large corporations which seek to invest in us. I will work to renegotiate better deals with Amazon and other corporations to bring jobs back to Queens. As a first-generation immigrant myself, I know how hard it is to raise a family in Queens. And I'm fighting for all communities to make sure their voices are heard. I'm the only candidate in this race focusing on keeping all residents in Queens safe and standing up in support of our men and women in blue. Rather than focus on ill-conceived reforms, I will focus on protecting the lives and property of our residents. We will not allow thieves, gangsters, and criminals to abuse our open, democratic society. I will increase the funding given to the NYPD and will collaborate with community leaders throughout Queens to promote trust and respect and ensure we can all live peacefully together.
Thank you.
My opponents are members of a failed political establishment. I'm the only businessman in this race. I'm the only candidate with a proven track record of success in managing budgets and implementing large projects. Thank you.
Okay. Next, Elizabeth.
Hi, good evening, Christina and Tony, and to all the members of the Juniper Park Civic Association. The board is so dedicated, so I want to thank you for doing the good work that you do, looking out for Middle Village and Maspeth and the surrounding communities. I grew up not too far from, or really in the midst of, my family was in Elmhurst first, and then that house I grew up in is now Middle Village. I live in Glendale. So we worked so closely together all the years I was in the city council. I look forward to having the opportunity to work with you again, given the opportunity. Come Tuesday, we are getting, ready for change. We look back on what happened in the past couple of weeks with COVID closing down our community and really hitting us harder than we were ever prepared for. And we weren't prepared because we never got our fair share out here in Queens. And I'm somebody who grew up with 14 brothers and sisters fighting for fair share. When we look at how much goes into the city's budget for Queens, we never get enough for housing, education, transportation, and yes, so when COVID hit our communities, so many of our families were doubling up just to put a roof over their head, and they were unfortunately catching COVID faster than others. Our trains are more overcrowded, and our buses are also. And that is part of the reason so many contracted COVID. And what made matters really bad for us here in Queens was the fact that we only have one hospital bed for every 1,000 residents of Queens. If you compare that to Manhattan, you have 7 times as much coverage. Should your access to healthcare be dependent on your zip code? Well, in Queens, we also have some of the highest response times. And it shouldn't be a matter of life or death. So we need a borough president who knows how to fight for fair share. I remember back when I was in the city council and council districts were getting uneven amounts of discretionary funds. I fought back, and because of that, the policy of the city now is changed and every district gets its fair share. So when we look at the need for more school seats, I'm proud of the time that I served representing at first what was the most overcrowded school district in the city. And then when I left office, it was no longer overcrowded. Well, when we look at the whole borough of Queens, 5 out of 7 of our education council districts are severely overcrowded. We need leadership who has experience leading in times of crisis. When I was working as a restorative painter after studying art preservation and working with my union, I decided to help those that were affected by September 11th. And I left that job to work with employers to help them access government benefits after September 11th. And when I took office in the city council in 2008, it was after the last financial crisis. And the mayor at the time wanted to close firehouses. I led the fight not only 1 budget year, but 3 budget years in a row. And every time we fought back, we won. We need a leader that's going to make sure that Queens is ready to help build jobs and opportunities, and that we don't miss the next Amazon from happening. And we certainly need a leader who's going to protect our public safety. And I'm so proud to have been endorsed by our frontline workers, our firefighters, our paramedics, our officers who risk their lives every day to make sure that we're safe here in our communities.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to the first question, and we're going to start with Dao Yin for this one. So, Amazon has signed a lease at the Metro Mall and is also looking at establishing a logistics center in Maspeth. Do you support Amazon's presence in Queens, and what would you do as borough president to help the neighborhood transition to its presence?
Yes, I strongly supported Amazon's investment in the Metro Mall, as well as, the Amazon's first attempt to put their second headquarters in Queens, in the city. Unfortunately, establishment politicians turned down Amazon with unknown reasons, because there was the borough president, the former borough president, was not so kind of involved in the negotiation with Amazon-like large corporation. Because I'm from business world, I know how to deal with large corporations. the government needs to have a team with aspects. Be prepared to talk to the business people, to listen, to read, to learn their approaches with a lot of numbers, their PowerPoints, and also to negotiate with them for more benefits from the large corporations to the local community. Beyond 25,000 decent jobs. We lost the Amazon, we lost more than 25,000 decent jobs. Think of the payroll tax, how much we lost for the borough, for the city. So I have to be a strong advocate to welcome Amazon-like large corporations to invest in Queens and bring back jobs to attract young people who can both work and live in Queens.
Okay.
Thank
We'll move on to Elizabeth.
Yes, so I was a supporter, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that it would have been good for Queens, bringing 25,000 jobs here. Amazon promised to make sure that most of those jobs were good paying jobs, and a lot of the service working jobs and construction jobs would have been union jobs. And they averaged over $100,000 they had for their entry-level position. It made absolutely no sense to me, and every poll that I saw had a significant part of our population in Queens supporting Amazon. So it was a mistake. The council did not put out any red carpet and welcome Amazon here, and unfortunately, we needed better leadership. And so we cannot let a next opportunity like Amazon ever slip away.
Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Miranda.
Well, thank you for the question. And I do appreciate when people are consistent, especially our elected officials when they speak at different forums and they say different things. So please check the facts as they speak today. But I want to say this, the Amazon deal, the way it was initiated, was not the right deal. It bypassed the checks and balances that were put in place. And it didn't, and too many tax breaks. So why weren't those tax breaks offered to our small businesses that are here in Queens? The strongest base that we have are small business owners being able to employ people locally. That has been the standard, that has been the backbone of any community. And the same tax breaks were not given to local businesses who we've been losing by the hundreds. Every month we lose hundreds of businesses closing down because of larger corporations coming in and changing the dynamics. Amazon now in its current format and how it's entered Queens is a lot more localized. It gives a lot more opportunity for direct community involvement and direct community employment without having to give up all the tax breaks that were offered and the benefits. And I don't think that was the way we needed to go when we were losing so much here in New York City and in Queens. However, the current structure has a place and is surviving in Queens and being more supportive, and it's going to have a more dynamic approach right now. So it's not a point of not saying that we don't want big business, but when big business comes in, it has to be in a place that's going to enhance our communities and not necessarily take over areas. And we have to make sure that they don't bypass the ULURP process or the processes that were put in place to protect us. They have to go to the community and you have to get community involvement. It can't be pushed along by political power of certain individuals to overpower community voice. Then if the community's voice is properly heard and they decide they want it, then it's up to the elected officials to support that move. But again, in this process, we know that there were way too many rules that were violated, too many tax incentives that were given that were not productive enough for our communities to support us in the way we needed to. So it takes leadership. It takes true leadership to understand what's required and how to make it fit in the best manner possible to be supportive of all the different Queens communities that is currently growing in. And I said, I think there's a great opportunity right now as we're speaking to local residents when they see Amazon moving in. They also want to make sure that there's checks and balances and that we have that approach. So I believe that we're in a better place than the deal that was originally negotiated. And in this process, I think we can include community input and have direct input into those decisions on how we expand going forward. And there's a great opportunity for that right now. But again, many people, as I say, would flip-flop on depending on who they're speaking in front of, whether they're for a project or not for a project. So please research the information correctly. And again, I think we're in a better place now than we were in the original deal that was proposed. And again, we need to support small business owners here in Queens. Again, because they are the backbone and they are the ones that have not gotten the benefits. There's a Small Business Survival Act that's been in the City Council for over 10 years that would help small business owners to be able to survive and support the community, and that has not passed. So as a Queens Borough President, we need to be supportive of both a possibility of larger interest coming in, but also be strong enough to make sure that we're supporting the small business owners to make sure that they are growing within our communities and providing the employment opportunities to the people that actually live in the community. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question, and we'll start with Elizabeth for this one. So the MTA is currently in the process of determining the Queens bus network redesign. Do you support the MTA's current plan, and what would you do as borough president to improve bus transit in the borough?
I do not support the MTA's plan. I came out against it when they released it, and they had a series of neighborhood and community engagement processes. I would like to see our buses remain free. I don't know if anybody has taken a bus recently, but with COVID, they stopped charging. And I believe that when you have no-cost buses, now mind you, people would say, oh, we're going to hit very tough economic times. No, we're projecting a $9 billion deficit cut in New York City. But the fact of the matter is that pollution causes great harm and costs the city so much. And so when you have free buses, more people take them and fewer people would choose to take their cars. And so that's one huge way we could also get people out of cars and to take the buses, in addition to the incentive of having no buses, no cost to the buses. Buses are actually subsidized over 70% by the MTA already. And so it wouldn't be that much of a difference between the fare box ratio collection and what it currently costs to operate our buses. There could be plans put in place to have better routes, but we need a huge transportation overhaul when it comes to access to rail. So much of our community is a transit desert, yet railroads go right through the community without providing opportunity for transit. And so I have a plan that I believe would move us forward, take more people out of cars, allow our buses to move quickly, attract business and real development opportunities. And by the way, I'm not taking any money from big real estate like some of the candidates in this race. I think it's important that our borough presidents engage the community and not be beholden to deep pocket big real estate. So that's part of my plan. And again, I do not support the MTA's current plan to redesign our buses.
Okay, next we have Mr. Miranda.
So we have spoken out against the plan, the MTA's plan. It really didn't engage our community. It has been created certain challenges as well as making more areas less accessible. I don't think they thought it out. And in fact, they've admitted that they didn't think it out fully. I attended some of those meetings in Manhattan, and I felt there was kind of like a disconnect between direct community voice and input. There was no actual changes. Now, I know some of our elected officials have transportation plans. Again, transportation plans that were proposed over 8 years ago, which never moved out of the city council, can't be revisited now like it's a new idea, right? So we are talking about in the Queens Borough Presidents having a visibility and a team, a permanent entity that oversees an overall plan for all of Queens and how we can invest properly, not only in the current, different mechanisms of transportation, but also looking at alternative means of transportation to ensure that we get everybody's interests and we're operating in a cohesive manner, because too often they react in piecemeal approaches, and piecemeal approaches do not service our community well. So having a permanent committee in the Queens Borough President's office with the people who are knowledgeable in this area, and to make sure that they are constantly working with the community residents about any proposals before they're implemented, I think is going to be a key factor in how we move forward. Again, many of the things that you are suffering right now in Queens, that we have been suffering in Queens, the transit deserts, didn't happen now. They've been going on for far too long. So the question is, why haven't we moved forward? Why haven't we gotten the things done? Why hasn't it been accomplished? And that's going to require somebody, leadership that's willing to call people out, call other elected officials out when they fail to pass a plan, when they're the ones who are blocking the advancement or the of investment in the infrastructure here in Queens. And we have to start holding people accountable. And that's other elected officials as well. And the community needs to be told who's been blocking this plan and why. And then those are the conversations that I think will move us in the right direction. I think too often decisions are made in back rooms and in quiet places, and they don't get exposed for what they are. So as the Queens Borough President, we need to have leadership that's going to be strong enough to fight back, expose the people who are doing the wrong things against us, and ensuring that we are fighting in a collective manner for an entire plan for all of Queens so that we can move forward collectively. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yin.
I'm against the MTA's new plan. First of all, they have not gained the community support. They will not. First of all, secondly, they are not increasing the frequency, but they're reducing, and they cause the confusion. When I talk to the community people, few people agree with the MTA's new plan. As we all know, MTA has never ever done a good job for decades now. The residents of Queens have the longest commutes in the entire city, and they bear the brunt of a crumbling transit system. To solve this issue, we should increase the frequency of express buses from Queens to the city. And also the light rail should be built throughout the Queens, from Queens to Queens. As all of us know, most of our subways are designed to get people to Manhattan. Instead, we should consider connect Queens to Queens. And it's unfair that our immigrants and hardworking families must endure consistent subway delays and streets filled with potholes. As a businessman, I will use my finance and management skills to get this city back on track. I will also fight to make sure Queens gets its fair share of the budget from both the city and the state. Thank you.
Okay. Next question, and first up is Mr. Miranda. The Borough President has the power to appoint or remove community board members, a power which has been abused in the past. As Borough President, what criteria will you use in choosing appointees, and what reasons would get a community board member removed?
Okay, so first we'll start with this. I believe that the Queens Borough President in the past has relinquished that authority over appointments and relied heavily on the decisions of city council people to make that choice. I think we're challenged with that process. We often find people say they've applied for their position and never were contacted, don't know why they were disqualified, and never had an opportunity for an interview. So we would centralize that process in the Queens Borough President's office, ensure that everyone is contacted who applied for a position, that they are communicated with directly. If they are not chosen, they will be told why, and they will be offered other opportunities to be able to work within the borough and still represent their areas and still have an active role. I believe there's plenty of things for us to do. I also think we need to start screening the candidates as well, to making sure that they're not working for the developers that they're supposedly approving projects for. They can't be as a consultant, they can't be on their payroll. And there has to be disclosed up front. If they aren't, I believe that's a clear conflict of interest, because even like they say, some of them say, well, I'm not going to vote on that issue, but they have influence over their other board members. So we can't allow that kind of influence to be able to carry it on. People have to be free and clear of any special interests with developers to be able to approve the plans and the changes that we need. I think those are things. We're also looking to see how long a person's been in the community, how active they are in the community. And again, if they don't do the job, they have to be, first of all, they have to be clearly told what their responsibilities are, what their expectations are. And then after that, if they fails to do their job, there has to be a process for removing them, notifying them, and saying, listen, maybe you may be overwhelmed at this time, there may be other challenges you're experiencing, but we're going to move along and allow somebody else the opportunity to be able to fill that position because I believe it's needed. I also would immediately change the structure of how meetings are done on all the community boards. It has to be unified and has to be the same across the borough. So let's say after they do introductions to community board, I think it should be immediately be open to community residents to be able to speak, because that's the reason they're there, to be able to hear their issues and address it. Allow them to speak first, then go back to the meeting. At a midway point in the meeting, open it again to allow the community a second opportunity to speak on issues, also for the people who arrive later. And then before you close the meeting out, to give the community a third opportunity to address their issues and concerns. Why? Because community members come into a meeting at different times. And what we often found is that when they wait to the end of the meeting, close to 2 or 3 hours later, many of the board members end up leaving. And so the entire panel is not there to hear their concerns, to be able to address them. So immediately changing the structure and having that level of accountability, I think, is extremely important. And during this crisis, we also learned the importance of having Zoom calls and having remote observations of the meetings. I think that should be standardized. Every meeting should be available to the people who can't make it or live in the area, who want to see what's going on and be informed of the things that are happening. So I think now that we've moved into this technological stage, we need to embrace it and continue that process to be able to engage more community residents. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yin?
First of all, I believe the community boards need to be appointed by a borough president who is elected, not appointed. Unfortunately, we will have appointed Queens Borough President city through the end of this year. This is not a democracy. I will appoint the right community board members. I will ensure the community board members are not bought and sold by the real estate industry. I will appoint community board members in favor of my sustainable housing policy. Again, importantly, elections matter. It's because the current board president is not elected. So it's hardly surprising that she has refused to explain why she removed Ms. Kian Smith, the former chair of CB2. I spent weeks fighting Governor Cuomo's executive order, which canceled the special election for Queens Borough President. Because of my opponents failed to stand up in support of special election, we now will have an unelected and unaccountable Queens Borough President for the rest of the year. I'm appalled by the treatment of Ms. Kian Smith, who has been denied the due process to which every citizen is entitled. Our community board chairs serve as volunteers, and it's concerning that a volunteer like Ms. Kian Smith would be suddenly kicked to the curb, particularly since he has so much support from members of the board. I think it's 32-0. So I think I think the borough president needs to appoint right community board members. Thank you.
Great. It's my turn.
Your turn, Elizabeth.
I want to thank all the community board members that are currently serving or have served at one time or another in the various different community boards of Queens. People forget that our community board members are volunteers. The borough president is fortunate to have 50 members. Most of the time there's full boards, and many, many more people who are waiting to serve. We need to make sure that the borough president looks at the community board as a real extension of the office. And when it comes to the issues that are important, be it economic development, public safety, our schools and education and libraries, we have experts. And it would be important for the community to have these experts sort of have an extension of the borough president's office in their backyard. If they, you know, and that's exactly what the community board is doing for us. And so it's important to make sure that we continue to have the community board have access to the borough president's office. We have to make sure that they're not taking, as Mr. Miranda has mentioned, from developers. You know, there are eyes and ears, and we need to continue to rely on what they say when it comes to important matters. Thanks.
Okay. Next question. All right, this is the powder keg here. The Cooper Avenue homeless shelter was opened in Glendale without input from the community and without the proper permits. It also does not serve the homeless who come from the CB5 area, who are mostly families. Instead, it houses single men, many of them coming straight from prison, who were released thanks to bail reform and the push to close Rikers Island. What steps will you take as borough president to hold the mayor accountable for his failed homeless shelter policies? Mr. Yin, you're up.
What happened in this Cooper Avenue Homeless Center is exactly the same happened in College Point Males Shelter. I have been fighting against College Point Males Shelter with the community leaders since the end of 2018. Again, no transparency and no community engagement. Without the proper permits, it's a closed order deal. On the other hand, our establishment politicians, including my opponents on this stage, they have treated symptoms without addressing the root cause of homelessness. At least we can say the main reasons for homelessness are jobs and housing problems. A job can produce good citizens. The city is putting homeless shelters in the wrong places. I have stood up and protested multiple times against the city's attempts to build such shelters in the wrong place. There are over 600 homeless shelters now. Only over 40 shelters are run by the city. The rest are run by other organizations. Our failed politicians have been dealing with this for decades and have failed to address the root cause of this problem. Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Well, the good news is Mayor de Blasio is only going to serve for another year. I have been against his failed policy for as long as he's been implementing his homelessness policy. It's gone from bad to worse. When we look at fair share issues, such as what I've mentioned in my opening statement, Queens houses over 10,000 homeless people a year. families, single adults, people in need. But many of these folks are coming from other boroughs. It's important to keep people who are going homeless in their communities close to a network of support. And we house nearly twice as many who go homeless here. That means those children who are in Brooklyn or the Bronx going to school in their community have to be uplifted and taken from a really bad situation and put in a worse situation. There are a few people getting very rich off our homeless budget too. The mayor's let the budget grow out of control, and it seems like a lot of his friends are the people that are reaping the benefits and getting the contracts. So we need to build more affordable housing and also make sure that we're serving homeless close to home.
Okay. Mr. Murray.
All right. So let's say I'm the only one here that's actually, I was Director of Security, overseeing the safety and programs at 8 shelters here in the city of New York in different boroughs. Queens has been targeted for more shelters than any other borough. So I think the first issue is making sure that there's an equal distribution of the shelters that are available throughout the 5 boroughs, not just Queens. The second issue that we've been fighting for is to ensure that if we're going to have these kind of shelters, we need to have community input as to how we can best support them, right? And they should also be concentrating to have the families that actually live in Queens be the ones that use the shelters here in Queens, because that centralizes the family closer to their family and friends and to their employment. It keeps consistency in the program, and we have to ensure that we have an overall wraparound program that leads to move beyond temporary housing, right? Because that's been their focus, temporary housing. We need permanent affordable housing, and there are plenty of opportunities to be able to build that in a timely fashion. It's more cost effective than investing in hotels and hotel rooms. So they have to take a better approach at this. They cannot force these things on communities and, like you said, sneak in overnight when there are no permits and when families are not looking. I think that's horrific, because not only does that do an injustice to the community residents, but it also does an injustice to the homeless population that's there as well, because it creates a hostile environment for them, which is totally unnecessary. There's open conversations and dialogue that needed to happen beforehand that involves the community board and our elected officials. Had they been sleeping on this, again, but this is where the Queens Borough President has that role. The Queens Borough President, as the leader of the borough, will be monitoring that type of development and the exploitation here in Queens, but we have more shelters than our fair share, as they've said before. And I think that's an important aspect of it. If we're going to build and help families here, then let's build and help families and build something that's going to address the needs of those families that are going homeless here in the borough of Queens. We are facing a pandemic and a crisis in front of us that I believe there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands of people who are going to be one paycheck away from becoming homeless. So the other part of this program is to make sure that we're investing in all the supportive programs to ensure that families are staying where they currently live at, not trying to move them out of where they are, but whatever voucher programs and supportive mechanisms we can put in place to keep them where they are currently living and provide that stability, we need to invest there. It would still be cheaper to keep them where they currently live at than to put them in hotels or in shelters where communities don't necessarily agree to have them. So I think the Queens Borough President is going to play a key role in how that develops in the most professional manner that serves both the community and the vulnerable population that needs our help. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next question, near and dear to my heart. There have been many historic sites in the borough beloved by their communities, which have been demolished or destroyed due to apathy by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. What will you do as borough president to protect Queens' historic sites? Elizabeth, you're up.
Thank you for that question, Christina, and thank you for your advocacy, all that you do to preserve our community. I know you live on Stockholm Street, or you're not far from there, and Ridgewood is actually the largest historic district in Queens, and I'm proud that we were able to get Ridgewood landmarked while I was in the New York City Council. I mentioned in my opening statement the years that I worked on historic landmarks in Manhattan. Many of them were like St. Patrick's Cathedral, Central Synagogue in Manhattan. And we really didn't have a lot of landmarks here in Queens. And that has changed, but it hasn't changed enough. And it is something like you, Christina, have landmarks dear to your heart. So is true for me. And I just, want to. Sorry, there's something happening with Tony's screen that's making me laugh. Tony, you're making a funny face? This is a serious topic.
I'm not making a funny face. That's my face. I don't think I am.
That's just his face.
Exactly. That's her face too. There you go. I'm trying to look at the timer.
You guys, I mean, Tony, you're laughing too. No, but serious. Landmarks, we need to do more. It gives us a great sense of place. And we need to protect our history as a part of who we are. And we'll work together to make sure we don't have to suffer losing an important landmark again. Thanks for bringing some levity to the debate. That's the first time. It's probably because I'm coming home. It's towards the end. Love you, Middle Village. Love you, Maspeth.
Okay. All right. So next is Anthony Miranda.
I absolutely support that we should be identifying and actively engaging the process of identifying historic landmarks and doing everything that we can to both invest in this preservation and to make sure that the community is supportive of those efforts as well and get the community involved. Too often we lose crucial pieces of property in history here in Queens because of overdevelopment. And I also believe that that requires us as a Queens Borough President and the staff that you employ is to make sure that we are actively, again, I think community boards can play a crucial role in this as well in terms of identifying different areas within their community boards that they believe deserve that status. And then we need to fight to make sure that they get the status that they are looking for and we preserve it. It's a great investment, it's a great historical perspective, and it gives the opportunity for the community to still grow. But at the same time, we need to preserve our history. And so I think it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Yin, go ahead.
Yes, we need to preserve the historic sites for Queens, definitely, because everybody knows Queens is the center of a culture. Queens is the center of diversity. And we need to think about the tourism and have more facilities for quality of life. And if I'm elected, the first thing I'm going to do is public hearings. So I will collaborate with community leaders throughout the Queens to get people's ideas, plans, to listen to people first, not like most politicians, just speak, you listen to. And treat the whole Queens and the city as a whole. Then you can know what part of Queens we need further development, but other part of Queens need to be preserved as Queens it is. And think about the parks, regulations, think of a lot beyond. So we never will ever demolish the historic site. This is the failure of the establishment politicians. They failed in Queens. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Miranda is up next. In the past, borough presidents have asked for concessions from developers in return for approving their land use applications, even though their community boards opposed them. Will you work with local community boards to achieve acceptable outcomes?
The question is, again, I lost a little bit, but working with the community boards for acceptable outcomes, and the answer is absolutely. I think community boards play a crucial role and they should be empowered. They represent the community and they're the voice of the community for us. They're the ones who present the challenges that impact their communities. if we're not listening to them, who else are we listening to? And I think that's the challenge. Again, politicians, many of them who are running for office, if they say not this year, have been taking the money of special developers over the past 6 or 8 years when they were elected officials. And so, again, we don't take any developer money. We ran our campaign by small business, small community representatives. And I believe that's crucial, right? A grassroots campaign says that we represent the people. And I think that's been what our campaign has been all about. So yes, when it comes to making sure that any development that's going to be done in our community has an infrastructure study, we have to make sure that's done, because quite often we're dropping buildings down in the middle of the community and there's been no infrastructure investment, an analysis done on what the strain is going to be on local resources, how it impacts local schools and local hospitals or police response or emergency response. They just don't do the work. And then there are other situations where the entire support system, the sewer system, is not developed enough and not wide enough to support the large developments that they're putting in the middle of our communities. So again, having the plan, proper planning, the infrastructure analysis done, the environmental study to see what the environmental impact is when we're dropping these buildings in the middle of our communities, and ensuring that we're representing the interests of the community boards. I think those are the key factors. As a Queens Borough President, I'm going to ensure that their voices are heard and that the things that I spoke of are adhered to the environmental impact as well as the infrastructure study to see what the strain is on local resources before we say yes. And before we take anything. And there has to be local jobs when we're building, and there has to be an opportunity, if there's a structure in place, to have support for the community. I think there's a great opportunity to have that conversation, but too often we are not having that conversation with the people who are developing here in Queens. We're allowing them to build and we're giving away city property. So the Queens Borough President, it's a great fight in front of us. We will not allow the exploitation of the land around us to the point that it has been going on. And I've often proposed a freeze on all luxury development right now. All luxury development to have a freeze on it right now until they've done the proper work and study for the infrastructure study and the environmental impact before it moves any further. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Yin?
Again, is the failure of the establishment to fail Cape Borough Queens is the hard hit for the housing crisis. I'm the only candidate to champion reasonably priced prefabricated housing, the buildings, that will ensure real estate developers can make a profit while charging reasonable rent prices. Because too many of the new housing projects service the upper class and the super rich. Given that I have been a business manager in China, Japan, and the United States, I know the best tactics and strategies to keep costs in check and ensure we are focusing on the right housing projects. Thank you.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Well, when we look at the time that I served in the city council, we might have gotten into one disagreement when it came to land use, Christina and Tony. You didn't see any outrageous overdevelopment happening while I was in the council in Middle Village or surrounding communities. I was proud of the work that we were able to do to build schools, and I think that was the only time that we got into a disagreement on land use issues. So you could trust me to be that borough president that's going to work with communities to make sure that whatever development happens is in character and is the development that's in need. And then when any of these developers get rights to rezone for higher density, that they're giving something solid back. Far too many big developers come into communities, put housing in place that is not affordable, and housing that taxes the system, whether it's our schools or our roads. And we need to make sure that we have planners in place and that the borough president works closely with the community boards when it comes to these very important decisions.
Okay. So I believe the next question is for Mr. Yin. Do you support the mayor's plan to legalize basement, garage, and backyard apartments, which basically would amount to a citywide upzoning?
It seems like an interesting proposal, but with a lot of problems coming later. Because first of all, we don't want to see too much Airbnb all over our neighbor. So the real solution will be my housing plan, real affordable housing plan. We need to eliminate all tax credits to luxury housing. All of those tax credits should go to low and middle income housing. And again, I advocate reasonably priced prefabricated buildings so that will ensure real estate developers can make a profit while charging reasonable rent prices. And also, I'm the only candidate to advocate for a 10% rent tax credit for the middle class families who are struggling with increasing housing costs. Thank you.
Elizabeth, you're next.
Thank you. What's most important about housing is that it's safe. And far too many of the illegal conversions are causing safety risks to those who house them and also to our first responders. We saw a few years ago a family getting killed in Woodside because of being in an illegally converted basement. We need to hold our buildings department accountable, and we need to look to increase above standard living for far too many people in Queens, and we shouldn't be looking to reduce regulations or to overdevelop. We should properly develop. And so we must look to build housing in transit-rich areas, and we must extend the transit so that we can build housing in areas. Christina, you're doing it again. Sorry, but look, this is a serious issue, and we need to make sure that New Yorkers are safe. And I've been endorsed by the firefighters and the paramedics and our first responders because they know when it comes to New Yorkers and Queens residents that safety should always be first.
Okay, so the question is, are we supportive of the plan? And so I believe the plan was developed because there are enough people who currently have these illegal conversions that it creates an unsafe condition right now. There's no way of monitoring it, and so they created a process by which they want to monitor that type of development. I think we have to put extra safety in this way as well. What we're talking about is people are creating spaces because there's a lack of available apartments and affordable apartments for other people. And we're also talking about families who live in homes that some of them are struggling to pay their mortgages and looking for the extra support. So I believe there's a couple of conversations that we need to have, and as a Queens Borough President and with the community boards, we can take those things into consideration and say, one, ensure that if these spaces exist, that they are being monitored and to see what the circumstances are that led. I think a lot of community boards also are the ones who identify these illegal apartments or illegal places that are created, and there hasn't been quite the response that's necessary to both investigate it and hold people accountable. So in that token, it says, yeah, we need to monitor it. We need to make sure that if they're created, they have to be safe and legal, that they're not endangering everybody in the community. And then when it becomes something that's abusive to any one community, then it's something that has to be addressed. It has to be monitored. It cannot be an explosion, right? Well, that's not the explosion that we're looking for. What we're looking for is responsible and affordable apartments to be made available so that people can live in it in a safe manner and at a reasonable rent. And I think that's the program which the Queens Borough President, working with the community boards, can work hand in hand to see the needs of the immediate area and how we can support those families and homeowners that are again, suffering right now, that are looking for the extra income, but at the same time, making sure that we're keeping people safe. Thank you.
Okay, next question. We're going to start with Elizabeth. Do you support the school chancellor's plan to rezone schools to improve diversity and eliminate the test for specialized high schools?
No, I'm not a fan of Carranza or his plan to integrate our local schools. When District 28 was told that a plan was going to be put in place, they were pretty much told there was no inclusion to putting a proper plan in place. There was no democracy to it. And back in November, they said they were going to have a meeting open to the entire Community Education Council district. And when I got to that meeting, it was beyond capacity, and the capacity was like only 100 people. So now you have a Community Education Council district that's severely overcrowded, 28, needs over 3,000 seats. And then they have a public meeting where they're trying to include the families, and there was no space for the concerned parents. So thank goodness we were able to stop him. And we need to make sure that we're building new schools. If we want to meet diversity plans, we could put a plan in place for the new schools, but the ones that have zones, parents and families move into certain communities so that they could go to the good schools. And no parent, and I'm a mother of 2, and both of my sons graduated from public schools. And I know, like all the parents who send their kids to school, they want their kids to get the best possible education. And no parent should be told that they have to go to a different school just because the mayor or the chancellor has a certain quota that they want to meet. So no, I don't support Carranza or his plan for diversifying. I support good schools, and I look forward to working with the community. Now, the years I was in the city council, 128, we were able to get a brand new building and then an extension, 49 an extension. We brought a Maspeth High School, which is doing very well, brand new building. Over 6,000 classroom seats to a district that was severely overcrowded. So I'm proud of the work that we've done together for District 24 school district, and I hope that we could do something very similar like that in other community education council districts. So important.
Okay. Mr. Miranda.
So let's start off saying, no, we're not supportive of the plan. I don't believe, and again, we spoke about this in other debates, I don't believe eliminating the specialized examination is the answer to the problems that we're facing. There has to be other criteria, such as the entire school year, what their grades were, their interaction, the civic involvement, teachers' recommendations. These are other criteria that should be incorporated. I don't think one single test should determine a child's eligibility to go to any one school. That being said, we are talking about specialized schools in certain boroughs only. Why is it only existing in certain areas? Why aren't all our schools performing at the level it's supposed to? I says, even Elizabeth Crowley just spoke about, I wanted to go to the good schools, and people moved into areas for the good schools. And that conversation alone is what's the challenge. The challenge is that we're identifying good schools. Even the Board of Education has said these are poor performing schools. And the question is, why haven't you held them accountable to a higher standard? Where has been the process by which all our schools are operating at the same level? I have a 12-year-old son that goes to Bell Academy. He was accepted into that school. It's a public school. But I know parents will go anywhere, no matter what you call the school. They're going to take their children anywhere it takes to get the best possible education. And that has been our struggle continuously. People move entire communities just to figure to get into a better school zone. I mean, where I lived at, I couldn't even go to the school that was literally 3 or 4 blocks from my house because it was not zoned in our area. But we're grateful for the opportunity to go to Bell Academy. They have been a tremendous school with a tremendous support network there. Again, all schools should be operating at that level. And that's why I say to you, it's not about taking one school over another. It's how we're going to take our education system and ensure that we are all operating on the same level. And one of the city councilmen that dropped out of this race had the audacity in one of the debates to say, I was able to build 20 schools in my district. How alarming would that be to everybody else who's an elected official sitting there saying that they allowed one elected official to build 20 schools in his area and all the other districts were suffering? We don't need to bust out children. I think that's the wrong approach. And they're talking about, again, they're not speaking that we're busing our kids and putting them in public transportation, right? Because they're void in that conversation. What they're saying is that they're not going to provide bus service. What they're going to leave it is to more responsibility for the parents to have to take their kids and travel to a different area, which is going to impact their ability to work, the things they do at home, and the travel time is now going to increase when kids can go to school and when they return back home. So I think this conversation is an ill-thought process. We should never get to the point of busing kids. We need to have an overall plan for all of Queens that not one elected official gets to say, I built 20 schools in my district, where we have an even proportional response, and that we're building schools which it has the best opportunity to incorporate other districts, right? Because where we're building now, we build a school and then we say, everybody else, you got to figure out how to get there, as opposed to planning properly and building a school that's centralized that will enable 2 or 3 areas to partake in the building and be able to get the best education for the children. So no busing, no elimination of the test. I think it has to be an additional process that has to be included in alternative measures. And I believe we're looking for the best education, so we shouldn't say one school is better than the other. The fact that we're having that conversation says that the system is failing our families and failing our kids, and we cannot afford to sit back and let that happen. So as a Queens Borough President, we will be looking at the entire structure of the Board of Education and how they're supporting our schools when it comes to public education and charter schools. And again, parents are not concerned with what you call the institution. Parents are concerned about getting the best opportunity for their children. And as a Queens Borough President, I'm going to continue to work to make sure that every child gets the education that they're entitled to. Thank you.
Christina? Yeah. Muted.
Okay, how's that? Okay, Mr. Ying.
Thank you. I'm waiting. I'm strongly against the chancellor's so-called plan. I protect specialized high school and keep the SHSAT. The one-time examination is not perfect, but is much better than scandal. Because these schools allow low and middle income students throughout the Queens to access high quality education. Without specialized high schools, these talented students would be stuck within a failing education systems, which offers very few opportunities for success. We should increase the number of specialized high schools and place them in neighborhoods of color to ensure these people have a chance to be admitted. I will support charter schools because they offer new and unique ideas in teaching to students from all backgrounds. We also need more vocational schools for students to learn real skills to find a job in the future. Unfortunately, only 37% of our high school graduates are prepared for college. We have failed our children. New York City spends over $25 billion on education per year, and much of this money is wasted. As the next Borough President, I will use my management skills to ensure that taxpayer money no longer goes to waste. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to the next question for Mr. Miranda. Another powder keg. Do you support the proposal to reallocate $1 billion from the NYPD budget? Please explain your position.
Okay, so the popular, this is a reallocate, and that's better than the common word that they're using about defunding, right? So let's look at how the police department is. The police department has taken over at least 6 different agencies, right? First of all, it's the regular police precincts. It's housing, it's transit, it's school safety, it's traffic enforcement agents, and I believe they're also talking about taking the taxi and limousine commission over, and we left out one more. So we talked about the consolidation of at least 5 separate entities into this budget that they're talking about right now. So when they talk about taking away money, I just wanted them to clearly identify which part of the system are we willing to make most vulnerable right now? I don't think we have to make a choice between safety and civil rights. I don't think we have to make a choice between safety and providing adequate funding for our social programs. We need to fund our social programs. They need to do what it takes to be able to fill those things. They need to fight against the abuses of wasteful spending in government. These are things that they can do to save that money. They talked about demilitarization of the police department. That was one of the conversations that came up. Again, police department is a paramilitary organization and follows that kind of rules. But there was a time in history back in the Giuliani administration and Anna Moan when they actually brought tanks, and Anna Moan got on TV and said during 9/11 that he had the ability to shoot down a plane from the air. I mean, that's not what we're looking for right now. The police department and the police structure is evolving, but we have to be conscious enough to be able to say that we cannot afford to sacrifice our safety or the safety of our families. They're talking about removing school safety officers or eliminating them from the police department or not having the protection in school. Well, I have a 12-year-old son in school. When you start talking about not having my child's safety, then I think I, as a parent, need to have a greater voice in this conversation. Right? We talked about there have been attacks in our schools and that have been well documented. And did we have a presence? We have a presence in schools now because of all the murders that have gone on, because of the attacks, because of the gang activity. So I'm cognizant of where we came from and what protections that we're looking for our families and our children as we move forward. So there is an opportunity to change the manner in which police work is done. There is an opportunity to evolve the police department because we have been having this fight. Again, I created an organization almost 30 years ago called the National Latino Officers Association to fight against discrimination, to fight for the changes in the police department that we saw that we needed, to better represent the community and to have better interaction with the community. So it's policies and procedures that have an unfair and biased impact on communities of color that the struggle is in front of us. So if we're talking about those things, if we're talking about illegal police activity, if we're talking about abusive police practices, then we need to start moving in a direction that directly addresses those issues. They talked about 50A, and they talk about everything that they're talking about does not deal directly with the issue of police misconduct. They're diverting the conversation from the issue that's in front of us. We want to deal with police misconduct. No officer in uniform wants to see that type of abuse go on, and they should not be supporting it whatsoever. We support as officers that we don't want bad officers in our ranks as we want to continue to represent our communities. Latinos and African Americans had to sue for the right to be able to work as police officers. They didn't give that to us. That was a litigation that allowed the opportunity us to have a different opportunity to work in the police force. Now that we're there, I says we're there because we want to represent our communities and be able to be in that place where we serve and protect. And serving and protecting means that we now have to change our message. And there's been no legislation whatsoever that deals with illegal police quotas, both for summonses and arrests that impact all of our communities. The police department should not be a revenue generating agency, and that's what they turned them into. We need to go back to doing community policing, go back to identifying with the people that we live with, making sure that we have real relationships with the families that we're working with every day. That process has changed when we got to crunching numbers. And when the police department only focuses on revenue and crunching numbers, they lose the ability to do their jobs properly and interact with our communities in the right way. So if there's waste, let's do away with the waste. But when we separate these agencies, let's ensure that we're separating them properly and we're not jeopardizing anybody's life or anybody's family in this separation that's going on right now. But there's a proper planning, so we cannot be reckless about what we say or what we do. And I believe politicians right now have been reckless about their comments, and they're all walking back their comments as we go forward. They're now trying to redefine what defunding really means, okay? But then we're talking about responsible actions. Fund the community-based organizations. Fund the school programs for our kids. Fund the summer work programs. But I don't have to choose between my safety and funding for those programs. They're giving us the wrong choices. So as the Queens Borough President, I'm not gonna allow that to be the conversation of whether I have food on my table or pay for medicine. We don't need that kind of conversation. That's not the choice I wanna make. I want both. I wanna be able to eat, get my medicine, feel safe, and fund the programs that support our community. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Yin.
Let's talk about NYPD reform or defunding. First of all, what happened in Minnesota and recently in Atlanta were crimes and unjustified. We all agree. But we should not punish all good police officers because of the conduct of a few bad apples. Because those crimes have nothing to do with our good, hardworking NYPD police officers. The New York City Police Department has 375 million interactions with members of the public every year. The responses are overwhelmingly positive. My opponents have stood idly and left the police unprotected. The criminals have taken advantage of the inaction of politicians and my opponents. Burglaries are up 4 times compared to this time last year. Murders and shootings have doubled. 300 NYPD officers have been injured. It's unfortunate that my opponents have allowed this to happen. New York City has allocated between 8 to 9 billion to the proposed new jails. There's no reason they can cut $1 billion budget to NYPD because we just cannot reduce our police offices, but increase. When I was working for a department of the city as a graduate intern as early as in 2001, we had more than 40,000 police officers. Now, we only have 35,000 police officers. We need more police officers. We even need police officers get out of the patrol car to walk on the street in 4 cases to make sure Queens residents and the people in the city feel safe. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's my turn.
Yes.
I said earlier in my opening statement that defunding the police department was a seriously bad idea. And I have watched many of my opponents backtrack, as Mr. Miranda has said, and I want to thank Mr. Miranda for his years of service to our city as an officer. We were once at a time where the crime was so high in our communities that people were moving out. They didn't think Queens was safe to raise families. We cannot afford to go backwards. Defunding is much more than moving agencies out of the NYPD or moving the school safety officers, meter maids. This particular council budget discussion right now, the debate, they would like to do away with a new class of recruits. Now, at the same time, last year they approved hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime. And the overtime budget has spiraled out of control. For example, parades, special events, well over $50 million a year. When Bloomberg was the mayor, to save money, we cut the parade route. Give Yankee Stadium free police. They make a lot of money off the stadium being safe. We spend over $2 million a year in policing Yankee Stadium. There are ways that the police department can save, but defunding is drastic. And so I don't support that. Nothing is more important than public safety. It truly is the bedrock of our community. It is how we build strong families. And I have to say that I truly enjoyed the debate tonight. I really have to go because I'm supposed to be on another program shortly. It was good to see you again, Christina and Tony, and I want to thank the Civic for all the good work that they do. you guys do. It was a privilege to serve as a council member for Middle Village and Maspeth for 9 years. I'm proud of the work that we did renovating Juniper Park and Maurice Park. And know that I'm somebody you could count on. So I hope to gain your support on June 23rd. And I look forward to the opportunity to serve together. Thank you so much. Have a good night. And thanks for being funny, Tony. Take care, guys. Hope to see you soon.
Okay. So to the other two candidates, do you need to leave too? No? Okay.
No, I stay here.
You're gonna stay? All right, great. So I guess Mr. Yin, you'll take the next question. Okay, so what will your funding priorities be as part of the city's post-COVID economic recovery?
Yeah, my funding priorities will be, again, the public safety and public health care systems and the small businesses. As all you know, our public health care systems is terrible, especially in Queens. And again, the establishment politicians, including my opponents, they have failed Queens. Queens public health infrastructure is incapable of addressing the needs of our residents in normal times, let alone during this pandemic. Compared to the other boroughs, Queens has been left behind. Again, the city has allocated 8 to 9 billion for new jails. This money could be used for public health. And the other priorities instead. It's the time for new leadership. And also, small businesses are Queens' lifeblood. We need to bring our small business back after the pandemic. We need to help and enforce our small businesses. So how do we do that? We need to introduce corporations to work with small business. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miranda.
Again, the question is about our funding priorities when we get into office as the Queens Borough President. So our funding is about how we support community-based organizations in all the parts of Queens. And that's about identifying those programs. One is opening the process up, because there's been many people who have wanted to apply for funding and have been left out of that conversation, never had the opportunity. So I want to open up that process. I want to make sure that the community knows where we're investing and who we're investing with. We want to make sure that we're reaching programs that have the greatest amount of outreach and providing the greatest amount of service to the different parts of Queens. I think that's an effective approach. Healthcare has been the thing that has, again, we're facing COVID-2 coming soon, right? And that's going to be a thing. I don't know if the government's going to provide enough funding for the relief that we're going to need. So it's going to be a creative partnership between private and public institutions to be able to provide the best amount of services. We have to go beyond thinking, we got to think outside the box and seeing how we can best serve the residents of all of Queens. We had a general failure in almost everything that we've been doing right now. Again, small businesses have been leaving Queens by the hundreds every month. And there has been no relief in sight whatsoever. And again, I spoke earlier about the Small Business Survival Act, would have given small business owners a footstep to be able to stay in the communities, to be able to survive through the things that we're facing, but that still hasn't gotten passed by the City Council. So I believe that we need to make sure that we're investing in the training programs and the education programs and how we're going to now create employment. Because going forward, I said, many families are going to be one paycheck away from becoming homeless and struggling. And so how do we bridge that gap? And the Queens Borough President is going to play a crucial role. That's why I said opening up the process, seeing what new things are out there for us to be able to invest in. We're investing in community-based support mechanisms that in every part of communities is going to have a different need and may identify a different program. But the people need to know exactly what we're investing in. It should not be a surprise. People should not wake up and take some year to figure out where we've been investing our money and who we've been investing with. And it's not going to be based on political favors or whether you support a candidate or not, or whether you're tied to a political machine. How effective are you in providing services to the community, and what exactly is the outreach that you're fulfilling? These are real questions, and they deserve real answers before we start investing any more money in anywhere else. And I think most of the people would appreciate the openness and the opportunity for other community-based organizations to say, wow, there's an opportunity for me to apply for some help because I've served a critical role here. Then I think that's going to be what we do. So we're going to do in community-based organizations. We're looking at healthcare. We're looking at programs that will provide employment, increase employment in our district. And we're looking at, again, as we explore, the Queens Borough President does have some input as to the land use and development that goes on. So what is the development that's going to fill the needs of the community? Nothing should be a surprise. There has to be a certain amount of openness to this process that says that everybody's voice is heard and they have the opportunity to voice their concerns. Community input is crucial to how we move forward in the future and to make them part of the process, not an enemy to the process. So I'm looking forward to that chance as the Queens Borough President. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll give Mr. Miranda the next question. The Borough President has the power to introduce legislation in partnership with a council member. What kind of legislation do you plan to introduce as Borough President?
Okay, so the legislation I was focused on, I believe that discrimination and disparity are play a crucial role in why all of Queens is not serviced properly and does not receive the services it's supposed to. Legislation will be introduced to make sure that we have a freeze on luxury development, that we get the infrastructure studies done before we approve any future projects here in Queens. And the infrastructure studies, what is the strain on local resources? What is the sewer system? What is the response? What is the strain on our school system, our hospital system? Before they break ground, before they approve it. It's also going to be saying that we're not giving away any more Queens land for free for the overdevelopment or for billionaire developers to make more money. I think we have a responsibility to see what the not only the economic impact, but the ecological impact on our community is going to be. We haven't had these studies. And again, when you sit there, I said, that's the legislation I'm going to do. It's accountability. Legislation that says we're entitled to information, we're going to get it, and we're going to stop anybody from taking advantage of our communities without having our direct input. As the Queens Borough President, we can introduce that legislation, hold city council people and elected officials accountable. I think that's a crucial role for the Queens Borough President. Too many times, elected officials say they're representing us and they do things opposite our interests. So I think it's important that the Queens Borough President can be independent enough to be able to identify those people, say, no, these elected officials have been supportive of our plan and these elected officials have decided to go against our plan. Community residents needs to know who to vote for in the future when they're not responsive to the needs of the community. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yin.
Thank you. As I said before, if I'm elected, my first day will be holding a public hearing, because today's leadership talks a lot, but never listens. I will invite all the community leaders and activists from Queens and listen to their plans, ideas, and opinions. As the Borough President, listening will always be my first priority, and I would seek to increasing jobs by working with large corporations like Amazon, which seek to invest in us. As you all know, the Amazon investment would have created 25,000 new jobs and would have helped transform Long Island City into a key business district. And in turn, these new jobs would have contributed to the strengthening the local economy. And also, we need to increase affordable housing and improve public transportation. We need back access to Manhattan, we need to speed up the monorail to LaGuardia Airport. And also I said we must protect our residents and businesses because our economy is already destroyed, that we cannot allow our city to be ruined as well. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the end of the questions that I have. Tony is going to now ask you some yes or no questions. So take it away.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate your answers, your sincerity, all your thought into all the questions that Christina came up with. But I have a lot of constituents. I'm a third-generation businessman, not a newbie. We're over here 100 years. And I want to know some questions that I hear from my fellow business people and residents who've been here for 3, 4, and 5 generations to see what you're doing to secure the people who made New York from the beginning to what it is now. So either yes or no. This way you have an idea of where you're thinking. You agree. Anthony, I'll start off with you just because you're to my left. You agree with the closing of Rikers Island?
Yes.
And how about you, Mr. Day?
No.
No?
No.
I'm sorry to hear you.
No.
So you don't agree with it? Thank you. Okay, also, now, for small businesses, since the mayor failed Manhattan and all the stores were destroyed and all the small business who worked so hard, the blood and the heart of the city, destroyed told by the mayor, back off, treat everybody with kid gloves. If this happened to Queens, would you ask the National Guard in to protect our small businesses so that they don't get loss of everything? Anthony, again, I'm sorry, I was just going from left to right, no meeting, it's only 2 left. What would you resort to? The answer to the question is yes, no. Would you call the National Guard in to secure so our small business would not lose their business?
I would call the National Guard in, not just for our small businesses, but I would call the National Guard in
just to handle the situation. That's a good answer. That's good. But the thing is, the main thing was the National Guard was brought in from Manhattan because all the business, millions of dollars of business were destroyed.
Yes.
And that's in homes, everything, property and businesses. So you're right. I want to entail the whole thing because there was just left to be destroyed. And I want to know what you do when you answer. Mr. Yin, what do you think? Yes or no?
Yes, definitely we need a National Guard to protect our small business and the residents as well. We need to plan ahead because the ruling itself demonstrates we need more police officers on the street. So
Okay.
we need to increase funding given to the NYPD, not decrease.
And again, we're going to keep it yes.
Police officers
we're
are
gonna do
not
everything.
enough. We need a National Guard.
Everyone went over that with Christina. I just want to do yes or no. This way, the people who are asking the questions know where you stand. Also, then I guess for yes or no, you want community prisons, Mr. Yin.
No.
Anthony?
No, I think we have other alternatives that are better.
Than community prisons, correct?
Yes.
This is a far-fetched one, but I don't care. I'm going to ask it. Do you think elected officials should be drug tested? Seems like that we do with our police, we do with our firemen. We put everybody under the stringence of making sure that they have clarity. And we have all these elected officials that are making all the rules for us to live by. Do you believe that our elected officials should be drug tested? Mr. Yin?
No.
No.
Yeah, that's a discouragement. No.
That's what?
They will discourage people. The the hardworking people deserve the privacy.
Okay, so the fireman and a policeman doesn't. Mr. Miranda?
I believe they should all be drug tested and as frequently as possible. I've said that as part of my platform before. I said I think it is scare elected officials. We need to test them and to make sure that they're competent when they're making decisions. Some of them make decisions where not only we're on drugs, but are might possibly intoxicated. So yes, as a protection, their elected officials test them all and test them regularly.
Last one I'm going to ask you guys, do you believe in letting out prisoners with no bail? Mr. Yen?
No, I'm strongly against the bail reform.
Okay, so you're against it. Good. And Mr. Miranda?
So the answer is, again, the question is not necessarily yes or no. What we had was a system that was not working properly. And you cannot, the bail system was never set so that people with more influence who are more affluent can bail themselves out of jail, right? And that's the system that we're faced with. We made proposals for two ends of the system, bail reform and jails. The front end and the back end.
So your answer is no, though? So you're saying no, right? No. That's basically no. Do you think that the people should be out on bail? There should be no bail. They just go right out from committing a crime, going out to the streets. No, that's what it is. It comes down to that because it returns.
Listen, that's not what I'm saying. The people, and again, the law doesn't say that either. The people say there's certain types of crimes. The people who are committing felonies and they go to jail, they don't get released without bail. So presenting that information, obviously I'm a law enforcement officer, so I know that side of it. When you talk about somebody jumping a turnstile or something minor infraction, a beer in their hand or something they didn't have ID where they end up in jail a long time, that's the wrong process. So again, we have addressed the tail ends. We didn't fix the system, and that's why we're still having this conversation. The investment had to be made in having timely trials and having people go to court, because when a defense attorney adjourns a case 3 times, the DA adjourns it 3 times, and the judge adjourns it indefinitely, you get somebody who hasn't even been found guilty of a crime being in Rikers Island for more than 1.5 years. I did the timetable. So that's the potential that you have somebody in there without having been convicted of a crime. They end up just waiting for a hearing almost 1 year and 1.5 years. That's the abuse of the system that they were trying to correct, but they invested in the wrong ends. They had to invest in the middle of the structure, and they didn't do it.
And just so we make it clear, everyone at the structure for the business in Manhattan were in one day and out the other without bail. So I'm just saying, so the people who destroyed places in Manhattan went in and out of the jail system without bail. They just went in and out. They didn't stay in jail. I'm just saying, we want to make sure we understand that. I understand what you're saying about people, privileged people.
That didn't have to do with bail reform. That had to do with political people like the mayor making a decision that they weren't going to prosecute certain cases. That's a different conversation, right? Because they wholesale categorize everything that happened during that time period in special category. So they removed all the protections that we had in place specifically, and that had to do with your mayor and your governor, and believe it or not, your city council representatives who are currently running for office. They're the ones who make decisions.
Yeah. So you're against that, what they did?
No, of course I am. If they commit a crime, if people commit crimes, they need to be held accountable. There's no system that we have that doesn't hold.
Okay, well, they're bending the rules, and that's what people see in the streets. You can see whatever you want to see, but people see in the streets, they're committing crimes, and they will now not going to jail, and they're getting out because they twisted it.
Again,
my question was, you're against it. That's all.
Excuse me. That's why I said no to the bail reform, because the bail reform law is ill-informed and has left the dangerous criminals on our streets.
Right.
And you asked questions about Rikers Island. Remember, the city council already voted. We are not changing that. They voted to close it. They also passed a law right behind it that says that no jail will ever be built on Rikers Island again. So our elected officials closed that conversation. It's no longer available to us. Now the question for our community, the question that they left us with, they're all leaving office right now, right? They're all being term limited out. That's why they're running for Queens Borough President, but they're all leaving office, and they left us with these situations that they created, which means now we have to find alternatives, and we have to do it in a responsible manner. We cannot allow, again, they closed that door. Look at the law. There will be no jails built on Rikers Island, and they voted to close Rikers Island, and none of them will be in office when this happens. But we're left trying to figure out how to handle the criminal justice system and still be responsible to our communities. That's why I said we don't sacrifice our safety for anybody. We need to have our safety, but we can still have all the other things that they're looking for, and protecting people's civil rights is still a thing that we can achieve collectively. It's not one or the other. Bad choices.
Well,
yes, we don't have the money to build the new jails.
I know, it's $3 billion.
It's failed.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming this evening. Thank you, Christina. You want to add more to it? It's been very helpful. The people at Juniper, These are the people who came, who want to listen to our problems, listen to your questions, and they're here. These are the people who want to run for office and represent us as borough president. And I'm so happy you guys came. I'm so happy Elizabeth came and the three that showed up. And thank you so much for showing for care for our community.
All right, so do you want to do
Thank you.
closing remarks?
I'm sorry?
You want to do closing remarks?
Yes, I think that'd be good. We must give it to them because they're here. We might as well.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Yin.
Thank you. I'm the only candidate left in the race who's championing a public safety message. I will work to listen to everyone and unite leaders across Queens to keep our citizens safe and fight against all forms of racism. Small businesses are our lifeblood. As an Asian American and a businessman, I also know the struggles that small business owners face, especially given the ongoing health crisis. I will bring creative leadership to Queens and ensure that we bring our economy back on track. I hope to win your vote and become the first Asian American Queens Borough President. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miranda.
Again, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak with all the community. It's extremely important. I understand that there are some real challenges that we're facing. We're not always going to agree on that answer and that solution. I don't think there's any one answer to give us the best results that we're looking for. This is what I do know. Our public safety is not something that we should be taking for granted for anybody. Protection of our children and our families is extremely important. There's a system that's broken that needed to be addressed, but they still have not addressed those problems properly. The people who we've chosen to represent us up until now have failed us in that process and are now responding political messages, let's say what's popular as slogans. And we don't need that as a Queens Borough President. We don't need people who have already served us and have failed the system, right? There are people who have served 6 years, 8 years, 12 years, and they have not provided the solutions that we've been looking for all these years and the protections for our families and small businesses. Why would we give them another 4 or 8 years to do the same thing that they failed to do in the past? What you're looking for is a different type of leadership. Somebody's willing to take that on. I have over 20 years working in the New York City Police Department. I retired as a sergeant. I was decorated in the police department. I was the chief of police for the Administration of Children's Services. I understand the balance that's needed to making sure that we are protecting everybody's interests and that it is properly serving our community. That's why I'm asking for your support. I'm not a politician. I'm just a parent that got fed up that politicians keep making us promises and never keep their word. I got fed up that we're still standing on the outside of these changes and they're not considering us in the decisions that they're making right now. We cannot afford to not have a seat at the table, and I'm guaranteeing you a seat at the table. We're gonna have the fights that are necessary. We're gonna be vocal on both sides. We won't always agree, but we are absolutely gonna be working together to ensure that our communities are protected. Thank you so much.
You know?
Thank you both, and also Elizabeth for participating. As we said, just want to clear something up because there were some people who asked. We did ask Donovan Richards. We tried to connect with him multiple times. He did not return emails, and the phone number we had, the mailbox was full. So we tried multiple ways to contact him. He did not respond. And Costa, he is the other candidate in the primary. He confirmed that he was going to be on this call. And yesterday, his representative contacted me and asked if it would be acceptable for them to send a surrogate. And we said no. You know, if Costa can be on the Zoom calls for the city council votes, which he was on yesterday, then he can show up and, you know, give us the respect we deserve. So that's why we didn't have everybody on the call. It's not that we didn't invite them or try, we did, you know, and we gave everybody the same opportunity as far as being privy to the topics we were going to discuss. So I believe we conducted this very fairly. So I want to thank you. You know, it's unfortunate that we have to meet this way and we never got to meet you in person. You know, we're going into a voting booth, like not really being all that familiar, but I think you did give us a very good summary of who you are, your background, and what you believe. And I think this has helped people who are going to vote in the primary make a decision, because I do feel like I do have enough information now to make my decision.
And Christina, you want to explain the dates again for the elections? People that can open early elections are on till Sunday. Explain everything.
Okay, so yes, there's early voting. For the people in our area, the poll site is the Metro Mall. The times vary from day to day, but you still have tomorrow and Sunday to vote early. Monday, there is no early voting, but you can mail in a ballot up until the 23rd, Tuesday, or you can vote in person at your local polling site on Tuesday. You know, I'm sure they will have all of the COVID precautions in effect. So you have to stay safe when you go do that, but you do have the opportunity to vote in person. So that is the basics about voting. And I encourage everybody who is eligible to vote vote in this race and all of the other ones that are on the ballot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you all. Thank Anthony. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night. Yen, have a phenomenal night. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.